What's up, YouTube? This is Elder Stacy Sanders coming to you with part 2 of the video that we was making on the Black Pope, the Jesuit order. And the Black Pope doesn't mean that the Pope is a black individual. It's the symbolic meaning that it is dark, wicked, and it's evil. But we're going to be discussing part 2 today. We're going to start out this part with talking about the Nation of Islam, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and Louis Farrakhan. But before we get into the video, or we get into the discussion of the dialogue or the interview, I'd just like to say, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Hit the like button for the video and hit the notification bell so you can be updated whenever we release new content. If you listened to part 1, you received a lot of information concerning what's being done in the background with these secret societies and these trilateral commissions, border bankers and billionaires, and the commission with the politicians around the world. You found out who was in power, who was in control, and who were just puppets, and these kingmakers, so to speak. But I'm skipping over the part where they talked about Saddam Hussein, who was business partners with George Walker Bush, and they used him to keep that area over there intact, but the Jesuits in control. But once Saddam Hussein got kind of out of control, then they had him snuffed out. But we're going to go into another part here. A lot of times people just do not believe that there is power behind the power. I referenced in my video yesterday, Kanye West made a video called Power. And in that video, one of the things he said, how can one man have all that power? And they're talking about this person who's sitting on top. And I do remember when Saddam Hussein, and we'll get right into back into our interview, Saddam Hussein said that it was the Zionists that was having him killed and doing this, and because people, the population at large does not know what's going on, probably paid him absolutely no attention. That there is power behind the power, and there are kingmakers and there are puppet masters. And we saw in the last video that even the Queen of England is just a puppet who is being controlled by this particular order. But we're going to get back into the video. We're going to start here. They're going into talking about the Jesuits even controlling the Nation of Islam. We're going to pick it up here. Now, this is an interview where this man was a high-ranking official in the Jesuit order, and he's being interviewed and he's revealing this information. But this man, even though he knew that there may be a death certificate written for him for doing this interview, but he became a believer in Christ and believed that even though he knew that the recording was the phone call was being recorded and being tapped into, he knew that he would not die until God intended for him to die. So he gave this interview. But we're going to get right back into it. For the next 57 minutes, we're going to be skipping around this 75-page interview. I'm going to try to pull out some of the highlights and give you the information that I think is relevant for our various listeners around the world. We have people that hear our content in 42 countries around the world, so I will skip it around through this interview that may give the most impact to wherever you may live on the planet. Okay, but let's get back into the interview between Martin and Phelps, and I am reading the interview so you can hear it, because a lot of people, if you put down in the comments and send me your email address, I will email you this whole 75-page interview. It is a fascinating read, and it will open your eyes and then drop your jaw at some of the things that is revealed in here. And you take it for what it's worth, but I think this information is very pertinent and relevant for the times in which we live. Okay, let's get back into the interview with Martin. Says there was a statement you made in your book about the Jesuits controlling the Nation of Islam, and that was almost a surprising statement to read. I would think that someone like Louis Farrakhan would be pretty adamant. Yeah, he would hate me for this one. Well, let's think a little bit here. Chicago is ruled by the Archbishop of Chicago, a cardinal, who was Cody. I don't know who it is now, Do you think anyone goes down in Chicago without the Cardinal's approval? Where was the Nation of Islam founded? Chicago. Where is Louis Farrakhan's that murderer's mansion? Chicago. He lives like a king. What does he hand out? He hands out the protocols of the learned elders of Zion to all the deluded black Nation of Islam people so that they can hate the Jews, just like the Ku Klux Klan. That's right. Those three little tidbits right there prove that the Nation of Islam is totally under Jesuit control. They are going to be used to foment anarchy and agitation because they have an army called the Fruit of Islam, and they have millions of rounds stored in all the major cities, guns stored everywhere so that they can start the race war. And when that happens, you see, then the brothers in Washington can implement martial law, suspend the Constitution, and now the Jesuits have what they want. So they use the blacks in the North who hate the white people for their own destruction, for the destruction of the black people themselves, and the Nation of Islam is part of that. When I was in the Air Force and in jail for about 10 to 15 days, about 10 years ago, the Nation of Islam was paramount and tried to be paramount there. All the blacks in jail became Muslims. It's a hate the white man religion. Every white man is a white blue-eyed devil, and they're playing the Zodiac killer back in California many years ago. All Muslims, so it's a hate the white man religion designed to foment agitation and unrest. Martin Luther King was intimately involved with them. The only problem is Malcolm X got onto it. He realized he was being used and he separated from it. Then he ceased to be an agitator. Malcolm X was way ahead of his time. Yeah, Malcolm X was a good guy. Yes, he was. Malcolm X, even though he was used by the Jesuits because he hated the King James Bible, he was a great agitator. When he went to Mecca, he changed. Yes, he did. When he came back, he stopped being an agitator. He stopped hating the white man. He started to set up the African American movement, and as a result, he was assassinated by the high leaders of the FBI and the Nation of Islam. And what do they both have in common? High-level Shriner Freemasonry. And so we have the Masons in control of the Nation of Islam and the Ku Klux Klan, one agitating blacks and the other agitating whites to the glory of the Jesuit order. The other civil rights movement had the Jesuits behind that with Lafarge. Jesuit Lafarge was a great mover and shaker of the civil rights movement, and that agitation resulted in amalgamation, race mixing, the destruction of the white race and a black race, producing a nation of hybrids that cannot maintain free government. That is what they proposed to do in the first Reconstruction, but it failed. So they succeeded in the second Reconstruction in the 60s. The Jesuits are masters of the races. They know their strengths and their weaknesses. The only race who successfully resisted the Jesuit order is the white Anglo-Celtic Saxons race, with a Bible in one hand and a gun in the other. And so they've got to take the Bible away. They've got to take the gun away, and they've got to destroy that race. And that's what they are essentially doing here. I know that's a racist statement, but I'm sorry. It's just the way it is. That's history, and that's what they are doing. I want to pause right there because I want to interject. Now, when he's speaking this is back in 2000. But since then, Minister Farrakhan have changed in a lot of different ways. And it seemed like they have gone on with this other plan. Now you have this white nationalism, God-fearing, gun-toting people who went into the Capitol building. Now this interview took place in the year 2000. Now what he says here has taken effect. And that's what this country is trying to do today. In the United States, I believe, is one of the only countries in the world, on the planet, where the citizens have the right to bear arms. And you see on the Democratic side of the table, they're trying to take the guns away. See, and it's very important. You talk about to the freedom of the entire nation. So I stand with the Bible-handing, gun-toting individuals in the country, because it says something about the freedoms being stripped away, and then we're becoming a dictatorship. In order to control the people, they're going to have to take the weapons out of the people's hands in the United States of America, and we need to stand on that Second Amendment. But since it didn't happen with the Ku Klux Klan and the Nation of Islam agitating the other, it seemed like now they're trying to get the agitation started somewhere else. But it is that great push to get the guns taken away, because when the people cannot defend themselves, then they know they're in total, complete control of that particular country. What was Operation Mongoose? Operation Mongoose was purely black ops. In the words of Fletcher Poultry, of course, Fletcher Poultry, I consider the authority on what Operation Mongoose was. Operation Mongoose was to give the appearance of resistance to Castro's government by attacking Cuba, but in effect solidified his reign there. That's what it ultimately produced, and that's what the Knights and the CIA ultimately wanted, okay? The agreement that Kennedy made over the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, first of all, there was no missile crisis. There was no such thing as nuclear war. There is no such thing as a nuclear attack. That's all a hoax. It's just as much a hoax as going and landing on the moon. It's a hoax. Nuclear war, that fear was the basis for the Cuban Missile Crisis. And out of that hoax, Kennedy strikes a secret deal with Khrushchev that if you keep the missiles out of Cuba, we won't bother Castro anymore. Well, that's what the Jesuits wanted anyway. They wanted to solidify Castro in power. So that whole theatrical performance solidified Castro's power in Cuba. And the question is, why would the Jesuits create a fanatical power in Cuba? Run down the Cuban people, put them in poverty, imprison them at random, create a living hell down there. Drive out the mafia. The mafia could no longer have their casinos in Havana. Why would the mafia give up their casinos for the international drug trade to be developing out of Vietnam? Therefore, if the mafia is leaving and they don't have a bunch of American tourists going down to Cuba anymore, and Cuba is really a secret country, the Bible is not allowed there. Missionaries are not allowed in. Obviously, under Jesuit control, Castro was trained by Jesuits. That's the purpose of Cuba under Castro. Its purpose is as a landing base for foreign invasion. They have hundreds of vehicles underground, in underground caves there, ready for a massive invasion to the East Coast, primarily the South, because the last of the Protestants in this country are in the South. Cuba will always be under a dictator and will never go back to freedom, because it is to be a landing base. And you know what? It could very well be a landing base for a jihad that the Muslims will form in against us, because they'll come right across from Africa to Cuba, get reinforced, and then go landing into Florida with all their fifth column Cubans in Florida and Miami right now. Sounds wild, but that's a sobering thought. Yes, it is. Sounds wild, but I'm telling you, all the geography is in place. However, they can't pull this off until they get your guns. So that's why they're constantly creating these gun issues, people shooting people, Colombian high school to justify the confiscation of all the guns. And when that happens, then they can do what they want to do. Sobering. That's a sobering thought as well. There are a lot of strong Americans out there. The only problem is this: they're not united and they can't be led. Americans are leaderless because they do not follow. They all think their opinions are equal, and they're not. I would follow General Patton anywhere. I wouldn't question an order of his. We don't have men like that today, for the most part, because we don't have leaders like that today. I found our account of Patton's assassination fascinating. Also, you're speaking of the Jesuits' poisoning of him. A member of the OSS came out of the Spotlight newspaper and said that his name was Zapata, that agent. He said he was given a contract on Patton for $10,000. He didn't kill him, but he knows the guy who did. So Patton was murdered and General Vaslov was murdered, and both of them hated the Jesuits. Grand Inquisitor Joseph Stalin. They would have united together to eradicate Russia of that dictator, but the Jesuits would not have it because Russia is theirs. They must control the Orthodox Church to bring it back to Rome. That's why they got rid of the Romanovs. Patton's takeout was ordered by Wild Bill Donovan. Did I read that? That's right. Wild Bill Donovan was the head of the OSS at the time. And if you get Anthony K. Brown's The Last Hero, is on Wild Bill Donovan. He is in the Vatican at the end of his life in a picture walking in the Vatican to receive one of the highest medals from the Pope for a lifetime of intelligence service to the Vatican. That is in The Last Hero, and the picture is mesmerizing. I want to put it in my book. The OSS is nothing but an arm of the CIA and the Vatican, and that's why they took out Kennedy. They killed all the generals who didn't play ball. Let's talk about the CIA and the FBI some more. What can you tell me about their relationship to Count von Kovenbach? Well, based upon the past, if the CIA and the FBI carried out the assassination under Spellman and Janssens was the Jesuit general then, the same power structure is in place. So von Kovenbach, through his Knights of Malta and Jesuit control, the FBI and CIA, and his liaison control is now Cardinal O'Connor in New York. Some time ago, with Gunther Rosenbacher and others, there was talk about a split in the CIA of different factions. Some even say there is a third faction of the CIA that has split off. What's your opinion about the factional divisions within the CIA? I think it's true. I know that Angleton was the mole. Angleton was one who betrayed all those CIA agents in Russia, in which the vast majority of them were killed, when he gave all that information to the KGB kingpin on a farm in New York, in a van, stuffed with all the highest top secret CIA documents, okay? Colby comes along as a director of the CIA. I know his brother, he lives nearby me. Colby comes along as a director of the CIA, and what does he do? He fires Angleton. Bad news for Colby. Yeah, it was. They filled him up with lead. Eric Tim, he was also against Angleton. He was history. That's all told in Anthony K. Brown's work, Treason in the Blood. There's a whole little chapter on Eric Tim and some of the other guys in the CIA who were against Angleton. They all died. So there's a faction in the CIA that knows that something is rotten in Denmark, and they don't quite know what it is. Hopefully, they'll read my book and see that the CIA just an arm of the Jesuit order and Knights of Malta carrying out the Council of Trent and the Pope's temple power, and will revolt and start to tell truth about themselves. It's the same way in the FBI. My father lectured at the FBI Academy. He wanted to be in the FBI, but his parents were communists. So he was not led in by J. Edgar Hoover, but the FBI has low-level agents wonder just what's going on. A lot of them didn't approve of what happened in Waco. They need to come out and tell the truth of this whole house of cards. And that's what it is. This is not an undefeatable, invincible monster. It's a house of cards. It plays on fear. If men would tell the truth and come out and tell what they know and not be afraid, this whole house of cards would crumble. That's what they need to do. Who is Avery Dulles? Avery Dulles is the son of John Foster Dulles, Secretary of State. I believe under Eisenhower, Avery Dulles is a Jesuit, and he was a nephew of the head of the CIA during the Kennedy assassination. He was Allen Dulles, and Allen Dulles was a Freemason, also called the Gentleman Spy and the Book of Gentleman Spy. What was Angleton's role in the Kennedy assassination? Angleton was one who was to investigate it on the part of the CIA. Angleton also, I believe, was liaison to the Warren Commission. No, that was Dulles. But Angleton and Dulles were working together on that because Angleton was the chief of counterintelligence, and he named the Vatican desk and he manned the Israeli desk. So see how they're maintaining the Zionists in power with the Israeli desk. So they saved the Israel's hide in the 73 war because Kissinger almost lost it for them. Alexander Haig gave them the Israelis whose anti-tank missiles got them in their hands before the Egyptians got into Israel and disabled them. That was Alexander Haig, Knight of Malta, for which reason he was also the Supreme Allied Commander for NATO, promoted over 260 of his peers. Do you know anything about Haig's statement, "I'm in charge now"? Do you remember that? Yeah, I do. I don't know all of the implications, but I'm sure it fits within him being in fact in charge in the Nixon White House. Okay, I want to go back to Kennedy assassination, and I'm going to just mention some names. Clay Shaw, Jim Garrison, J. Peter Grace, Henry Luce, E. Howard Hunt, John McCone. Why are they so important to this story? Give me one and we'll start with one. Okay, let's start with Clay Shaw. Clay Shaw was a Knight of Malta. He was the head of the International Trademark of New Orleans, Roman Catholic, homosexual, multimillionaire, lived lavishly, etc. Clay Shaw was the personal friend of David Ferry, was a CIA agent, and was also a pilot for Carlos Marcella and the CIA and the Mafia together. Clay Shaw also was friend of Lee Oswald, and Garrison proves it. Here we have Clay Shaw. He was in the CIA. It was admitted by Richard Helms that Clay Shaw was a contract agent for the CIA and the highest security involved in the Kennedy assassination because he gets an attorney from Dean Andrews who's subpoenaed by Garrison. So if Clay Shaw is involved, he's a Knight of Malta, he's high CIA, and he can't go down. That's why the court was packed. The judge was biased against Garrison. The defense of Shaw was unlike any before. There was a guy behind whispering to the defense attorney that's not allowed in a courtroom defense. Shaw had to be found innocent because if he was found guilty, now the CIA is going down. Now we're going to have a revolution. So Clay Shaw had to be found not guilty. But it wasn't many years after that he died under suspicious conditions and never had an autopsy. He died of lung cancer, but he's part of the Brotherhood, and the Jesuits are very powerful in New Orleans. John McCone. John McCone was a very powerful industrialist and one who was part of the military industrial complex before he became the head of the CIA. He later went on to become part of, I believe, ITT. John McCone was another Knight of Malta, head of the CIA, and participated in the Kennedy assassination by virtue of him being its head, and he's Knight of Malta. Angleton is a Knight of Malta. Henry Luce is a Knight of Malta. William F. Buckley is a Knight of Malta. And William F. Buckley then ran the National Review. And what does he do? He blames Oswald as the lone assassin. Where was the picture concocted for Oswald? As though his head is put on this body that's not his. It was concocted probably, I believe, in the Time Life building when they did that, because Time Life was a whole bunch of CIA agents in it. And remember, the Time Life is right across the street from St. Patrick's Cathedral, where Cardinal Spellman was ruling from. So Spellman was overseeing the whole thing with Henry Luce. And if you get Luce and his empire, there is a picture of the Cardinal Spellman, Luce, Grace, Claire Booth, Luce, and Dean Russ on the 1963 4-year anniversary of Time magazine in the Waldorf Astoria, only months before the Kennedy assassination. And there's Dean Russ, the architect of the Vietnam War, according to the words of his own son. Okay, who was the other one? Howard Hunt. Howard Hunt is a CIA agent, of course. He said he was never in Dallas on the day of the assassination, but Mark Lane proved that he was. Thank God for Mark Lane. Here's another Jew getting in the way of the Vatican. Just like Daniel Ellsberg, here's another Jew getting in the way of the Vatican's Vietnam War. You see, the Jews who are getting in the way of the Vatican and the Jesuits are furious about it. So here's Mark Lane. He's openly defeated William F. Buckley in court before. Now he proves that Howard Hunt is a CIA agent in Dallas on the day of the assassination. The jury came forward with the verdict. And who is Howard Hunt? Howard Hunt is a personal friend of Harry Luce, a correspondent of Time Life. He's a personal friend of William F. Buckley. He goes to the Buckley parties at New York Yacht Club. He knows them both. He knows them. They are two of the highest knights. And guess what? Guess what Howard Hunt is called? He's called Knight. I wonder what he was. Knight of Columbus or whatever. He's involved with the Brotherhood. So he was there on the day of the assassination, intimate with Luce and Buckley, just as the chart says on the webpage. And by the way, the reader, your readers need to look at my website, the Vatican Assassins.org page. I'm going to mention a few more names. Oh, J. Peter Grace. We forgot J. Peter Grace. He was head of the Knights of Malta in 1963, head of W.R. Grace, and he's one of the largest shipping tycoons in the world, in control of all shipping in South America. Grace is a powerful man, or was a powerful man. Has anyone filled his shoes? Yes. Flynn is head of the Knights of Malta now, down to Florida, where their new office is. They moved from New York to Florida, I think Boca Raton. They have 11 Knights of Malta on the W.R. Grace board. And of course, guess who owns Taco Bell? W.R. Grace. So now we see W.R. Grace involved in the poisoning of America with fast food chains, so everybody gets heart disease, clogged arteries, so they can go to bypass surgery and further enrich the medical profession while carrying out their medical inquisitions. Isn't that clear? So not only are they going to kill all of the American people, but they're going to make billions doing it. I'm sure they're laughing all the way to the bank. They sure are. And where Grace did his banking, W.R. Grace, they did their banking at Chemical Bank in New York. Guess who runs Chemical Bank? The Knights of Malta. Jim Garrison was a very brave guy. Yes, he was. He lost his marriage. He lost his children. He suffered greatly through this, doing what he did. Okay, I want to talk about the movie JFK. You mentioned the Jesuits in control of Time Warner, produced Oliver Stone's movie JFK. What was the reason for this? To just further cement subliminally in the minds of the American people their absolute power. I think that might be part of it, but I think it's a test. It's a test to tell American people the truth, to see what they will do about it, and they did nothing. And that was the end of Garrison, or Kevin Costner's speech in the courtroom when he said, "It's up to you." And he looks directly into the camera, so he's looking at us. What was a call to do something about? It's a test. What will we do? And you know what was done? Nothing. The men in power, the men in the know, the men who could have said something did nothing. So that was the purpose of the movie. Meanwhile, the interweave of all these Jesuit subliminals all throughout the movie. Black is white, white is black. When Garrison is at the restaurant talking to his people, is Ignatius Loyola. David Ferry shows pictures of his Catholic uniform there and Satan pictures in his apartment. All very much Jesuitism. There were a couple of other things I noticed that I can't quite remember. They had a subliminal study the past. It goes on there. It's on a building or something. Study the past. And they said it's like Caesar. He's not in the loop. Well, Caesar was murdered by those close to him. And the ones who murdered Caesar was the priest of Rome. There are all kinds of subliminals in that movie which point to the power of the Jesuit order all over. The assassination right after they take his body out of Parkland Hospital, they've got to cross it on, the crucifix. That is a very unique Jesuit crucifix. When I was at the Jesuit retreat in Reading one day, I just wanted to walk through the place. I wanted to see where these sinners rule from. So I thought I would walk through the place and check out the rooms. I just so happened that the Jesuits were on the second floor by themselves. So I went to the first floor and the third floor and looked into the rooms. They were little tiny rooms, and on every bed is a crucifix with a crucified person on it. It's not the Jesus Christ in the Bible, it's their Jesus Christ. And that's the same exact crucifix that was put on the coffin in the movie when they are shipping the coffin out. And get a load of this. The guy who came to grieve Kennedy, the last rites, the guy who came to give Kennedy the last rites, Oscar Hubert, his superior was the Bishop of Dallas by the name of Thomas Gorman. Bishop Thomas Gorman was a Knight of Malta, answerable directly to Cardinal Spellman. Let's talk about Cardinal Spellman. Who was he? Why was he so important, you say, in the book? He really was the man behind it, right? Why do you say that? Cardinal Spellman was first very much involved in politics all his life. Remember, he was trained by the Jesuits in Fordham. He was trained by Jesuits at the American College in Rome. When he came back here, he was taken care of by Nicholas Brady and his wife, multi-billionaires in control of the Union Cambridge and various banks and multi-billion-dollar business. Spellman was part of getting FDR into office. Although I believe Cardinal Hayes was the cardinal, guess whose FDR name as his international agent during World War II? Francis Spellman. Francis Spellman was throughout the war front during World War II, going to and fro the Vatican, the Allied Army, etc. And with that, he built a huge network of contracts. He also, of course, had contracts with the mob. So by the time the Kennedy assassination, we have Cardinal Spellman here, who helped the Nazis get into the United States with the FBI. I met one of those Nazis about 6 months ago. I call him Pete, who showed me the Nazis' SS overcoat, which is a beautiful overcoat. I love to have it. And it was the FBI who brought all of these high Nazis in and resettled them and gave them money to settle. Who did that? Francis Spellman, by helping those criminals escape the theater of Europe so that they could not be prosecuted. It's called the Vatican rat line. That Lothus writes about in his Unholy Trinity. So Spellman is involved in getting the SS out, helping the Jesuits, whatever. Spellman is involved in the whole Second 30-Year War of the Vatican Empire outlined by Edmund Paris and his Vatican against Europe. And so he is in a perfect place to carry out the assassin. He has contracts with the Knights of Malta in England, and with the Knights he controls in America. He has his Jesuits contacts who trained him at Fordham and Rome. He was a personal friend of Pius the 12th during the war. He was a personal friend of the secret cold warrior Montini, Pius the 6th. So he is the perfect man with all of the connections to carry it out. He has contacts with the CIA, the Knights from the CIA, the Knights from the FBI, and the person of Carth Duluth, who still lives. He had contacts with high-level Freemasonry, with people like J. Edgar Hoover, and they're raving against communism, international godless Jew communism. He and Hoover are bosom, probably bed partners, and so Spellman is in the place to be in control of the CIA, the FBI, the Mafia, and through Freemasonry, the Dallas Police Department, like they control every major city's PDs, and so he carries it out. And then he also in control of the press, in control of time and life with Henry Luce. So the press never gets it. He's in control of CBS with the man named Frank Shakespeare, who was the head of CBS at the time. So you think Walter Cronkite is going to tell us the truth? No way. He's in control of CBS, NBC, ABC. They have stock in it. For heaven's sake, there's so no way the story is getting out. And he's in control of the CIA to hit and kill anybody who wants to come out and tell the truth, which is why there's 100 dead witnesses over the last 30 years. That's why they took out Fitzwald in 1992, outlined in the book by the CIA agent, First-Hand Knowledge, by Morrow. He was a CIA agent. He was in on the Kennedy assassination. He completely outlined it in his book, and he tells of that relationship of the CIA to killing Fitzwald. How is getting out. This is the only getting out by fearless preachers who preach the word of God and aren't afraid of telling the truth politically, trusting God that he will move and do his part now that he's done our part. FBI Director Hoover, Earl Warren, Gerald Ford, Johnson, Jesuit twos. Jesuit twos, all 33-degree Freemasons. And remember, the council on the 33rd degree is located in Washington. They control all the Shriners in the country. Washington is controlled by the Jesuits from Georgetown. The capital of the United States is at Georgetown University, not the White House. If you go into the president's office at Georgetown, you will see a picture of Bill Clinton kneeling at the grave of Timothy Haley, past president of Georgetown, while the present president Donovan, who is on the Walt Disney board, is standing behind him. I wanted that picture. I wanted a copy of that picture. Those people threw me out of that office. They would not let me have a copy of it. I sent another person, a lady, up there. They would not give it to her. I want that picture for my book of Clinton kneeling at the grave of these Jesuits can't get it. But if you go into the president's office, it's there. Georgetown is the capital. They control all Freemasonry. In fact, if you go to Maryland, they've got the great big lodge across from the great big Jesuit Institute in Baltimore. A great huge Shriner Lodge is across the street from a Jesuit university, and they're enemies. I want to talk about Bill Clinton in a minute, but before we go to him, who is Cardinal Spellman? Cardinal Spellman, his surname was Deca. He was the third in command on the FBI at the time of the Kennedy assassination. Cardinal Spellman was the real head of the FBI. Hoover was a wimp. His queer buddy Tosin, who was nothing, was second in command. So Hoover and Tosin were just figureheads. The real heads of the FBI were Cardinal Spellman, the Knight of Malta, Roman Catholic, subject to Cardinal Spellman. Cardinal Spellman fabricated evidence, covered up evidence in the FBI in the Kennedy assassination that was proven by Jim Garrison. Cardinal Spellman went on to retire. He went on to work for a huge industry corporation called Pepsi-Cola, which the Knights of Malta control, and which have ranches in communist China, which they set up. And he still lives. Cardinal Spellman wrote a book called Hoover's FBI. You can get it at the bookstores. In that book, he tells about the Secret Service, the FBI, and the Jesuits. Why do you refer to Kennedy's assassination as the Achilles heel of the Jesuits? Because if it's ever known that the Jesuits killed our first Roman Catholic president, if the Roman Catholics of Northeastern America ever find that out and ever believe it, the Jesuits are finished here. This country is the keystone to implementing the temporal power of the Pope around the world. If this country would expel the Jesuits and we get back our national sovereignty and we stand to be self-governing once again, we will have our liberty and the Jesuits will be out, and we will begin to experience real financial prosperity and real living. So if that is known, that the Jesuits are the ones behind it, that Rome carried this out, the Catholics and the Northeast would have a revolution. We would have another revolution because American Roman Catholics are not like Catholics in the other country. They think they are their own opinion. They believe in freedom of conscience. They believe that they have the right to express themselves. Catholics in Poland don't believe that. Catholics in Italy wouldn't dare believe that, but the Catholics in the United States here do. They have a lot of Protestant principles. They don't really comprehend this whole idea of universal, worldwide temporal power of the Pope. They can think it's just a religion. But if those Catholics in New York, if those 2 million Roman Catholics knew that Spellman was behind it and O'Connor has covered it up, we have a revolution. Because it's the Roman Catholics, unfortunately, who only do anything about things. The Protestants don't do anything. They're all a bunch of wimps, a bunch of cowards. They don't do anything. It's the Roman Catholics who apparently have built our major cities. They built our skyscrapers. They're the greatest steel workers. They're the ones apparently with the guts enough to bring about a change. The only problem is they're ungodly because they don't know the Lord. They don't read the Bible. They don't know Christ. They're not born again. If they would get born again and come to know Christ with their determination and their resistance to tyranny, they have another reformation. And a lot of people's heads would be going to trial and to the block for treason. I'm going to go back now. How did the protocols of the learned elders of Zion, authored according to you by the Jesuits, further Jesuit agenda? Going back to Lincoln, who was John Surratt? John Surratt was the young man, 20 years old, who called time outside the Ford's Theater. He was mastermind of the assassination. John Surratt was helped by the priests of Washington to escape Washington. went up to Canada, was taken care of and housed by the priests, by the Bishop of Montreal, and then was ferried across the ocean to the Peruvian in a steamer called the Peruvian. And he went to, I believe, Ireland, then into England, and he went to Rome to the Pope's Vatican there. He joined the Zovian army and was stationed in Alexandria, Egypt, until he was found and arrested. In 1867, he was brought back and stood trial in Washington. There, a woman was involved in the picking of the jury, and a high Roman Catholic was put on it. And because it's no murder to kill a heretic, the jury was hung in the first trial, and Surratt went free. And he was also free in the second trial because there was 2 trials. He died in 1914, I believe at the age of 72. And they gave him, of course, a very, very pompous funeral, a high requiem mass that are usually only given for priests and nuns. Evidently, he deserved it. Of course, John Wilkes Booth, he was never killed. Corbett never killed Booth in the barn. Booth escaped Washington with a password according to Phineas Bates' work, The Escape of the Suicide of John Wilkes Booth. He escaped to Kansas, and on his deathbed confessed to his physician that he was John Wilkes Booth who shot Lincoln, and he escaped with the help of a Masonic password. So just like there was a patsy for the Lincoln assassination, there was a patsy for the Kennedy assassination. Why is April the 15th so significant? Well, April the 15th was the day that Lincoln called out troops on the South. It was the day that Lincoln died. He was shot on the 14th and died on the 15th. It's the day that the Titanic was sunk. And it's the day all the 14th Amendment citizens of the empire, like the good serfs that they are, go to confess once a year and confess to the government with their tax returns. Beware of the Ides of April. How do you see that unfolding? What's that? The destruction of the Western Empire. As far as the action of overthrowing the government and having a tyranny, is that what you mean? Right. What do you see life like here in the next 5 to 10 years? It's hard to put a date on it. It's hard to put a year on it. But I would say it's going to continually become more and more a matter of central power in Washington. You're going to have less and less power in the Congress, and one of these days the Congress is going to be closed. And all you're going to have is a commander-in-chief. We're going to have some form of absolutism, with the president becoming now a dictator. Do you think George Bush Jr. would be that person? He could be. I wouldn't say he will be, but he could be. It would be someone like him with complete allegiance to Rome. Just like his father, his grandfather stepped up to the CFR. His uncle is a Knight of Malta. It would be someone like him, and he will be the next president. They're already chosen him in the College of Cardinals. Everything else is just a show. Jesuit trained Buchanan is a show. Roman Catholic McCain is a show. The Black Roman Catholic Keyes is a show. Although he tickles me, he advocates abolish of the 14th Amendment. If that happens, what are black people going to do? They're not citizens. They have no rights. Dred Scott comes into play. He's fake. So what I see here, more and more centralization of power in the hands of the president. The Supreme Court is just a rubber stamp. He becomes the king. The courts are nothing more than the courts of the king's bench. The Federal Reserve Bank will remain in power. Everything will be monitored and controlled by Washington, unless some of the God's men start trusting God and get in control of the state and cause it to succeed. The only answer to this is state secession, leaving the union, leaving this union. It's not a union, it's an empire. Leaving the empire that began in 1868, assuming national sovereignty. Once again, and the first state that would do this, I'm moving here because I don't want to see the FBI anymore. I don't want to see the CIA. I don't want to see any of these national bureaucracies anymore. Montana seems close. Arizona seems close. Well, then they do it. Will when they do it. I'll move there, but that's what would happen if things continue as they are. We'll have race war. We're gonna have the Muslims fighting the Ku Klux Klan, white siding with the whites, black siding with the blacks. There's gonna be a bloodbath everywhere, and what will justify martial law and the military and the whole 9 yards, and also foreign occupation, we're going to have that too. And you know how foreigners are in a foreign land. They rape the women. They couldn't care less about the social strata of the country. They have no mercy on the people. They have a foreign tongue, and that's what they'll do. And that's all the more reason for a state to succeed. I've advocated that Pennsylvania should succeed for the last 15 years. We have our own deep water ports. We have our own agriculture. We have our own heavy industry. We have coal. We have everything we need to be a sovereign nation. We don't need this empire anymore. The only problem is Pennsylvania is completely controlled by the Jesuits. Every major city is under their control, and so the place is slated for destruction. All the momentum and all the Mennonite and Amish countries are southeastern Pennsylvania. Everything else is Catholic. Pittsburgh, Scranton, Philadelphia, Harrisburg, all Roman Catholic. The Roman Catholic people too will also be sacrificed. They will be killed too. Let them not think that they're going to be delivered because the Jesuits run the show. According to the Jesuit Molina in the tape I just sent you, it is lawful to kill, and they will kill as many Roman Catholics as necessary to bring this plan to fruition. Define the Jesuit term universal absolutism. Define it. That means worldwide, universal, over every nation, absolute power. Absolutism is their great doctrine, that absolute power resides in the hands of the general. He is limited by no constitution. He is limited by no law. He is the great doctrine of divine right, the divine right of kings, who was so fought against by the Calvinists. We Bible-believing Calvinists believe in the rule of law. The law is king. Rutherford's Lex Rex, the Jesuits believe the king is the law. Lewis, the 14th, I am the law. So it begun to be a universal, worldwide king who himself is the law. All authority will be in him. He rules the world from Jerusalem as the beast. We're gonna stop right there, because as you see here, they're laying out this plan to get to this particular utopia that they're looking for, when in fact the Bible says the heart of the king is in the hand of the Lord, and he turns it in the position or the direction that he so desires. This is all coming together to bring about this one world order, this one world structure, and everything that we see that's going on in the United States of America with former President Trump doing all the stuff that he's doing, trying to get rid of democracy, turn the country into a dictatorship, so that that one particular individual, the Bible says that the Antichrist will seize control of all kindreds, nations, tongues, people, rich, bound, poor, free. He said, he that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword shall be killed with the sword. All of these people are leading us, ushering us, but whoever this global leader is going to be possessed by Satan himself, a part of that, Satan's wicked trinity. And he's going to take power over the entire planet. Every kingdom, nation, tongue, worldwide, global domination. So we're going to stop right there. But if you put down in the comment section, send me an email. If you want this 75-page interview, I will email it over to you. and so that you can read it for yourself. We only scratched the surface. At least 2.5 hours worth of reading left to get through this, and then I jumped through it trying to highlight some things that may have dealt with over in Germany or Russia or in an Asia area down in Cuba. All try to hit all of the places that I can find where I know that people who watch my content are spread out through these 42 countries that watch me. So, but please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Our desire is to give you information that will educate and enrich your life. That's what we want to do here, is try to help somebody to become better, to learn more, to become a better individual. So until the next video, till the next time, remember, if you want a copy of this, just send me an email down in the comment section and we'll make sure we get it to you. God bless.